for coming.
Thanks. Right, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And today what I wanted to do is just talk to you about a couple of interesting letters in the collection, but particularly in the context of how they've been calendared or catalogued in the past, how two different projects have dealt with them. And now the context of this partly is, you may have heard that the Early Modern Letters Online project, which is run in the History Faculty up to now, is coming into the Bodleian Library. There's Millie there, is the vanguard of the staff who are coming in. There will be Miranda's coming in next week, and we're hoping to advertise for another post before too long. So that's the context of that. Early Modern Letters Online is a union catalogue of early modern letters, and one of the core things in that catalogue are the Bodleian's letter collections, which were calendared between the 1920s and the 1970s. Now, and subsequently the cards have been digitised and placed in this database. So, first of all, I'm going to read from a couple of letters in the Tanner collection, and I want to then we'll talk about how they've been calendared. So, Cornwallis was a Catholic gentleman living in Suffolk, and the letters are written from his estate in Broome. Now, he had been quite a significant statesman under Mary Tudor, but the religious climate in England wasn't conducive to Catholicism, and he'd retired to his estate. And you find his correspondence is extremely interesting in that he was busy with various schemes and hobbies. And in this one, for example, he's discovered that he might want to open a coal mine, and I'll read what it says here. It says, "Cousin Hobart, I received your letter the 28th of May, and thank you for the same, because I did mistrust these magnifical titles of the Germans, as he puts, or the Germains as he spelt it. Therefore I did desire your opinion of this book De Secretis before I did buy it, and now I am to desire you further travel, meaning toil I think in this case, to buy me the works of Agricola De Mineralibus, for I am in hand with a coal mine in Yorkshire." And actually, what I really love about this letter is that as a PS, he says that he's sending a piece of coal to his correspondent, so he can have some kind of. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, which is a shame. Okay, and the other letter here is also from this Thomas Cornwallis, and he's got another scheme on the go. This is only a month later, and he says, "Cousin Hobart," poor old Hobart's getting the brunt of all this. "If you have not Lipsi Saturnalia, I pray you borrow one of them. In the latter end of the book you shall find diverse figures of the plays in the theatres and amphitheatres of the sword plays in Rome, both on horseback and on foot, amongst which, I think it be the 4th or 5th figure, you shall see a coach with 2 wheels and 2 horses to draw it, which having no thills," which seem to be the poles attaching it's a chariot, as you can see from the picture there, that's from the book actually. "Having no thills, I cannot conjecture how it is holden up. I would gladly have such a one to ride about my park, but the workmen here cannot discern with what device it is carried. I pray you therefore repair to Mr. Cavendish, who made a coach for Her Majesty to go as well on water as land." So it's a really, interesting. This ageing gentleman from Suffolk beginning to find all sorts of schemes. Now, this is the big reveal now. I'm going to now read the calendar entry for this from the so-called literary index, and I want you to see if you can spot the anomalies in the description. So here it is. You can see it for yourself. Cornwallis to Hobart, undecipherable archaic script. Now, there's a problem there, as you can probably see. So the letters were supposed to have been calendared as part of a programme to create abstract of early modern letters in the collections, and that project ran from the 1920s, I think, to the 1970s, and it became the card index of literary correspondence. Now, it's now been rekeyed, as I say, and put into the EMLO database. So, unfortunately, there's something like 300 entries in the database which have the word undecipherable. There's also another 37 that say baffling. So, it's quite clear that some of the calendarers couldn't actually read secretary hand, which is a bit of a problem. I will admit, these are not the easiest secretary hand scripts to read. There's actually no entry at all for this letter because they'd given up on the whole idea of transcribing Tanner by then. Let me turn to another project. This is from the amazing Carte collection, 275 volumes of papers, many of which relate to James Butler, the first Duke of Ormond, and they're one of the major archives for 17th century Ireland, named after historian Thomas Carte, who accumulated them and bequeathed them to the library in 1753. So as important state papers for Ireland, the library commissioned a professional librarian to calendar the entire collection. And it's a pretty remarkable work. It's 50,000, at least 50,000 documents in the collection. And he calendared the lot between 1878 and 1883. Unfortunately, the curators of the library then looked at it and said, this isn't good enough. This is not a good enough calendar. And so it remains in manuscript form and it's not indexed. So we have a bit of a difficulty finding what's in this collection. There's various projects are on the go at this very moment. Is Alex here? There he is.
I was late, sorry.
Yes, you told me never to mention Carte again, but anyway. So we're hoping to do some AI work on the calendar and see if we can't extract some text. Anyway, so 75 volumes of that. Now Edward Edwards could read secretary hand. That's the good news, because otherwise the calendar would be terrible. And this is what he said for this particular letter, a letter of 6th of December 1684, from the Duke of Ormond to his son, the Earl of Arran, who was the Lord Deputy of Ireland at this time. I'll quote from the calendar first this time. Although not quite resolved until the receipt of Rochester's answer to the Duke's letter, whether or not he will wait in Dublin, his successor's arrival, he still rather inclines to do so, because, in quotes, it may be for both our satisfactions to have some discourse together. Okay. For which there will be no due time after the giving up of the sword, and that is resigning the lieutenancy. For upon that event the Duke is determined immediately to embark, let the wind blow as it may, unless indeed it be a rank storm. Lord Kingston, on the contrary, is not to be got aboard, so loath is he to leave a good town, though it be to go to a better. Now that's, it's okay, it's quite interesting, but it's not, it's not earth-shattering. But here's another problem. I stumbled across this letter by chance during a project 20 years ago to we digitised the calendars from the 1660 to 1687 period, and I discovered that wasn't the whole letter after all. There's another section at the end of this, and I'll put it onto that page now so you can see it, and this is what it says. And it says, as upon this day, which is the 6th of December, the date of the letter, about 14 or 15 years ago it was, that Mr. Blood and his crew set me a horseback. It pleased God to deliver me from that attempt, and it pleased the king to resent it as well in his discourse as by a proclamation. It was not long after when the same fellow attempted to steal the crown, nor long after both these exploits that he became a courtier, and I and my friends had the pleasure of seeing him daily in the prince's gallery, by which of these actions it was that he made his pardon for having committed murder in the rescue of criminals that were on the way to their trials or execution in the north, remains yet a question. Some passages have put these reflections afresh into my memory as I was dating my letter. Now, sure enough, it turns out that this is the famous Captain Blood who attempted to steal the crown jewel. I mean, that's a fantastic story in its own right. You want to read that in Wikipedia. He sort of cut them up and beat them flat so he could get them down his trousers and all this kind of stuff. But he also tried to murder the Duke of Ormond, which I didn't know until I saw this letter. It's actually quite famous, obviously. But on the anniversary of this letter, 15 years before, he had attempted to assassinate Ormond. And being like a totally awful Hollywood baddie, and you wouldn't believe this if it was in film, he decided rather than just kill him on the road, as he had the chance to do, he'd tie him up, put him on a horse, set him a horseback, as he says there, and take him to Tyburn, where he would hang him up. And of course, Ormond escaped. So, as they always do in films. And so, but there he is. Not long after that, he's a courtier, and this is a very strong criticism, really, of Charles II and his court, I would say. But none of this appears in Edward Edwards' calendar entry. And I can't help think that's actually worse than the undecipherable archaic script, because at least with that, it made me look at the letter and see what was in it. Whereas this one, you would think you had the whole story right there. He left out the most interesting part of it. I think I'm coming towards the end of my time. So I've got one more letter just to keep you entertained. It's another one that's a mid-17th century letter, this one. And this one is from Colonel Thomas Rainborowe, the famous Republican parliamentarian soldier, to William Lenthal, Speaker of the House of Commons, whose papers are to be found in the Tanner papers. Again, the calendar entry leaves a little to be desired. It's another one of the literary index ones. It says, in brackets, an almost impossible script. Appears to be describing an action at sea, brackets, or movements of convoy ships. Several ships named. Well, I won't read this one out, but I'll just read the opening so you can see how important and interesting this letter actually is. Mr. Speaker, my last was sad, this most sad. As I then told you, my fear it is now come to pass that my ship, the Swallow, the Satisfaction, the Hind, the Roebuck, what's the rest of it? The Pelican, are all declared for the King, have imprisoned their officers and all others that stood for you. And then you can, if you're interested, you can read the rest of that letter, which is quite extensive. But unfortunately, there's no calendar entry for that one either. And it is quite an important letter about the naval mutiny of 1648, which is part of the Civil War. Okay. I think what we will do then, as I've mentioned finally that the EMLO project I talked about will be revisiting these calendars, obviously, and we will be tackling the 283 undecipherables and maybe get some entry for those. Hopefully adding more letters to the database from the collections as well that haven't ever been calendared. And I promise if we stumble across any more Magnificall Germans or wicked plots, we will put them in calendar this time. Thank you.